I want to talk to you today about a character who breaks my heart a little. Not because his story is tragic, even though it is, but because his story is very familiar. Remus Lupin is not just a werewolf professor in a shabby cardigan. He is every person who has ever told themselves, I can't have that. Not me. That's not for someone like me. Every person who has watched opportunity after opportunity arrive at the door and found a reason to say no. Every person who has carried a story about what they are allowed to have and lived inside that story so long that they forgot it was ever a choice. Today we are going to decode Lupin, and I think you're going to recognize him, maybe even more than you would like to. Welcome, witches, wizards, and magical souls. I solemnly swear that your magic is limitless. So let's go back in Remus Lupin's story. He was bitten by a werewolf when he was a small child. And from that moment, before he was old enough to understand what it meant, before he had any sense in that matter, the adults around him began to tell him what his life would look like. You won't be able to go to school, you won't be able to make friends, you will need to stay hidden, you can't have a normal life. Those weren't cruel people. They were probably trying to protect him, to help him. But what they handed him, alongside protection, was a complete map of limitation. And Lupin, being a child, being human, being the kind of person who trusts the people who love him, he believed them. He believed them so deeply that those beliefs became invisible. They stopped feeling like beliefs, but they started to feel like facts. He just started to think for himself, this is how the things are for me, for someone like me. And that, right now, is the wound that no potion has ever healed for him. So let's look at what Lupin's story actually shows us, because it is extraordinary when you lay it out. 1. Education. Lupin grew up believing that he could never go to school, that Hogwarts was simply not available for someone like him, that a normal child, with classrooms and friends and the ordinary magic of learning, was someone else's life. And then, when he was 11, Dumbledore called and he made all of it possible. Lupin didn't create that opening. He didn't believe it was possible. Someone else had to see it for him. 2. Friendship. Even at Hogwarts, even surrounded by peers, even in a place he had been told he couldn't go, Lupin hid. For years, he kept his condition secret from James, Sirius, and Peter. He was there, physically present, building what would be the most important friendships of his life, and still waiting for the moments they would reject him. And when they finally find out he was a werewolf, James Potter called it a bit of a furry little problem. I really like it. They didn't leave. They became animagi, illegally and dangerously, so that they could keep him company during his transformations. His deepest fear, that is, if they really know me, they would go, was wrong. And it has always been wrong. And yet it took him years to let it go. And even then, not fully. 3. Work. After Hogwarts, Lupin spends years unable to hold a job. He is brilliant. He was always brilliant, as we can see when he teaches as a defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts. But he didn't manage to find a job because the moment his condition was discovered, he was asked to leave, again and again. And he actually accepted it as a fact. He never fought for it. He never built an argument for himself or challenged the system that kept pushing him out. He had been told since childhood that this was how it was for people like him. And so it was. 4. Love. And then we have Tonks. Nymphadora Tonks, who is warm, fierce, completely herself, and who fell in love with Remus Lupin. And he said no, he did like her back. A lot. It was very deeply painful for him. But he had decided, on her behalf, without asking her, that she deserved better than him. That being with him would only hurt her. That his love was something she couldn't have to carry. He dressed rejection up as a protection, and he called it noble. But here is what I would say to Lupin if I could. That was not your decision to make. When you decide for someone else what they can or cannot handle, when you remove that choice in the name of protecting them, you are not being selfless. You are being afraid. 5. A family. When Tonks becomes pregnant in the seventh Harry Potter book, Lupin's fear doesn't soften, but it intensifies. What if the child inherits his condition? What if he passes on this thing that he has spent his whole life being ashamed of? And here is where it breaks my heart completely. Because Ted Lupin, his son, was not a werewolf. He was a metamorphogus, like his mother. A child of extraordinary magic. The thing that Lupin feared the most passing on, he didn't pass it on. But he almost wasn't there to see it, because he had already decided the outcome before the story was written. 6. Permission. The thread running through all of it, school, friendship, work, love, family. This is one thing. Lupin never gave him permission. He waited for others to give it to him. Dumbledore, then James and Sirius, then Tonks, then Harry, who told him quite rashly, in one of the most honest conversations in the entire saga, that his father would be ashamed of him for running away. If you haven't read the books, I really recommend reading the seventh book, chapter 9, about this. Every permission Lupin has ever acted on came from the outside. And every time the external permission ran out, he retreated back into his story. I want to be tender here, because this is not about judging Lupin. Of course, what happened to him as a child was real. The discrimination he faced in a wizarding society was real. The pain of transformation as a werewolf, the exhaustion, the isolation, all of it is real. But I want to share with you what I have learned, both from my own journey and from the years of coaching people through transformation. The beliefs that we absorbed in childhood don't stay in childhood. They travel with us. They traveled with us. They organize our world day after day. They decide quietly and invisibly what we reach out and what we don't, what we think we deserve, what we think is possible for someone like us. And the most dangerous thing about these beliefs is that they don't feel like beliefs. They feel like facts. I can't have that. It feels like a fact. That's not for me. Feels like a fact. I would only hurt them. Feels like a fact. But it isn't. And it never was. It was a story given to you by people who are doing their best, but also who had a friend and who carried their whole belief system, who had their own map of limitation. And they passed those maps on, as people do without meaning to. And the work, the real inner work, is learning to see the map for what it is. It's not the territory, it's just a map. And maps can be redrawn. I want to say something about Dumbledore as well, because I think his role in Lupin's story is both beautiful and limited. Dumbledore is what I would call a creator of possible. He sees what Lupin cannot yet see for himself. He opens doors that Lupin has decided are closed. He says, with his actions, again and again, you're more than the story you have been told. And this is extraordinary. It's the role of a great mentor, a great ally, a great coach. But there is a but. Dumbledore could open the door of Hogwarts. He couldn't make Lupin believe he deserved to walk through it. Dumbledore could offer the teaching post. He couldn't make Lupin stay when Snape revealed the secret. James and Sirius could become animagi for him, but they couldn't make him believe in his bones that their love was real and lasting. Tonks could love him completely and openly, but she couldn't give him permission to receive that love. The permission has to come from the inside. That is the one thing all the Dumbledores in the world can't do for you. They can show you the door, they can hold it open, they can stand beside you and say, I believe you can, but you have to be the one to walk through the door. Do you get it? So let me ask you something now about your personal life. Where in your life is your Lupin story running? Not necessarily about illness or discrimination, but the same kind of pattern, the same kind of shape of self-denial. What is the thing you have decided you can't have? Maybe a relationship or a career, a creative life, a financial freedom, a version of yourself you secretly want to be, but have decided, for reasons that feel completely rational, is not available for you. Maybe you're telling yourself, I'm too old, it's too late, I don't have the right background. People like me don't get to have that. Or I would only hurt them. It's safer to stay small. And underneath all these thoughts, if you go all the way down, whose voice is that? Is it your voice? Or did you inherit it from someone else? Because Lupin's story shows us, when you look at the full arc, every single thing he believed was impossible happened. School, friends, love, work, child, not because the world changed or his condition changed, but because someone or something kept offering him evidence that the story was wrong. And the tragedy is not that the evidence wasn't there, but it is that he could never quite let it quite rewrite the story. So please don't be Lupin. Not in the sense of don't be someone who struggles. Of course, struggle is human, it's part of the journey, but in the sense of don't let someone else's fear become the ceiling of your life. Don't wait for Dumbledore to open the door before you believe you deserve to walk through it. The permission is yours to give, and it was always yours. So I want to close this video with something practical. Self-permission is not a grand gesture. It's not a moment of sudden revelation where everything shifts at once. It's much smaller than that, and more daily. It's the moment you catch yourself saying, "That's not for me." And then you pause. And then you ask, is it true? Or is that the map telling it? It's the moment someone offers you something, maybe love, an opportunity, help, a compliment, and instead of deflecting, you say, "Thank you. I received this." And you truly receive it. It's the moment you stop making decisions on behalf of people you love and you let them choose. It's the moment you stop waiting for someone outside you to tell you it is okay, and you tell yourself. That's how you're going to deconstruct the Lupin story. A choice made again and again in some small moments until the map starts to look differently. Until you walk through the door, not just because it was opened by Dumbledore, but because you choose that you actually believe, you actually deserve to go through the door. So, of course, Remus Lupin was one of the most gifted, the most loving, the most deeply good characters in the entire saga. But he spent most of his life believing he wasn't allowed to be any of those things. Don't let that be your story. You don't need a Dumbledore to tell you it's possible. You don't need the world to change before you give yourself permission. You just need to decide, today, in this moment, that the map you were handed as a child is not a territory, and that you can get to draw a new one. So tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you've been telling yourself you're not allowed to have, and that you would like to change if you gave yourself permission today? I'm looking forward to read you. I'm Alice, and I will see you next week. And until next time, remember, the one chooses the wizard, but you chooses everything else. May your choices be your magic.